Life on Virex Prime settled into a rhythm that surprised Lisa every day. The crystal spires of the capital city hummed with soft energy, and the air carried the scent of blooming sky vines that curled around every balcony she now shared a dwelling. With Kale, Lyra, and Nora not a grand palace but a modest home, carved into the living stone of the eastern ridge. It pulsed gently with warmth, as if the planet itself welcomed here. Ake morning began with silence, not the empty kind, but the peaceful, the kind that came from knowing you were not alone. Lyra would brew tea from earth herbs she had carefully cultivated, while Nora reviewed star charts and historical logs for the memory vaults Kale trained with the honor guard, but always returned. By midday, his presence, a steady anchor in their shared world. Lisa had been given a role too, not as a wife in the old human sense, but as a bridge between species. She worked with the Cultural Exchange Council, helping translate human stories into Virex thought forms, which were not just words but feelings woven into light and sound. At first she struggled, but Lyra guided her with infinite patience, showing her how a single human lullaby could become a shimmering thread of comfort in Virex communication. One afternoon, while walking through the Garden of Echoes, a place where memories of ancestors were stored in glowing orbs, Lisa paused before one that pulsed a soft gold. Nora appeared beside her. That one holds the first meeting between a human explorer and a Virex elder. 200 cycles ago, she said softly. They shared bread and silence and understood each other without speaking. Lisa touched the orb gently. It warmed under her fingers, and for a moment she saw flashes of two beings sitting under twin suns, one with rough skin and tired eyes, the other with silver scales and calm strength. They did not speak the same language, but they smiled that night over a meal of roasted root vegetables and starfruit jam. Lisa asked why they had accepted her so easily. Kale set down his cup. It was not acceptance, he said, it was recognition. Lyra nodded. We saw your heart long before we met your body. Your kindness to the ship's maintenance drone. Your habit of humming when you are nervous, your refusal to lie even when it would have been easier. Nora added, you cried when you learned about the extinction of the coral whales on Earth. You kept their memory alive in your dreams. That matters to us. Lisa looked at each of them, in turn her throat tight with emotion. She'd spent so long fearing she was an obligation, but they saw her as a person whole and worthy. Weeks turned into months, and Lisa began to feel the subtle shifts in her own body. The Virex air, rich with trace minerals, changed her skin slightly, giving it a faint luminescence in low light. Her dreams grew vivid, filled with colors she had never seen before, and sometimes she woke with tears. She could not explain. Nora said it was the planet speaking to her, bonding with her slowly, gently. Then came the day the sky darkened, not from clouds but from ships. The obsidian fleet of the Jar arrived without warning, their vessels shaped like jagged teeth tearing through the upper atmosphere. Alarms rang across the city, not loud blaring sirens, but deep resonant chimes that vibrated in the bones. The Jar were scavengers, conquerors who believed only the strong deserved to exist. They had tried to invade Virex space before and failed, but now they returned. With new weapons and colder hearts, Kyle was summoned immediately. His armor gleamed as he kissed Lisa's forehead, then Lyra's brow, then Nora's hand. I will return, he said, and his voice held no doubt. But Lisa felt fear, not for him, but for all of them. The Jar did not take prisoners. They erased cultures, burned histories, and enslaved survivors. That evening, the three women gathered in the central chamber. Lyra activated the home's defense lattice, a network of light that could shield them for a time but not forever. Nora pulled up star maps, her fingers flying over the interface. They are targeting the memory vaults, she said. If they destroy it, thousands of civilizations will be forgotten. We cannot let that happen, Lisa said. The words surprised even her, but they felt true. How will we stop them? Lyra asked gently. You are not a warrior. Maybe not, Lisa replied. But I am a human, and humans are stubborn. We rebuild. We remember. We fight with stories when we cannot fight with swords. An idea formed in her mind, wild and fragile but possible. She turned to Nora. Can you access the vault's broadcast array? Yes, but it requires a living mind to channel the signal. Then use mine, Lisa said. Nora's eyes widened. You do not know what that will do to you. The memories are not data, they are lives. I know, Lisa said, but if we can send every story, every song, every lullaby, every war cry, every love letter from every species the Jar have destroyed straight into their ships, maybe they will remember what they have lost. Maybe they will hesitately. Rob placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder. It is a great risk, so is doing nothing. They moved quickly through the silent city, the streets empty as citizens took shelter in the deep chambers below. The surface, the memory vault, stood at the heart of the city, a spiraling tower of living crystal that glowed faintly even in shadow. Inside, the air hummed with the weight of ages. Nora led Lisa to the core chamber, a circular room where light pulsed, like a heartbeat. This is where the oldest memories sleep, she said, including those of the Jar themselves before they chose Conquest. Lisa stepped onto the central platform and closed her eyes. Nora connected the neural threads, thin filaments of light that wrapped around Lisa's temples gently as spider silk. The moment the connection was made, Lisa gasped. She was no longer in her body. She was everywhere and nowhere. She saw the birth of stars. She heard the first word spoken on 1,000 worlds. She felt the grief of a mother on a dead planet, and the joy of a child finding a flower in the ashes. She saw the Jar not as monsters, but as a people who had suffered a great loss long ago, and in their pain had turned to rage. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not pull away. She opened herself wider, letting the memories flow through her and out into the broadcast array, a wave of pure remembrance shooting into the sky aimed at the Obsidian Fleet. On the bridge of the lead Jar, Vessel Commander Vor felt something strange, a pressure in his chest. Then a voice, not in his ears but in his mind. It was his grandmother's voice, singing a lullaby he had not heard since he was a hatchling. Then another voice, a friend lost in battle, then the laughter of his first love, all the things he had buried beneath duty and fury. Around him his crew froze, weapons, forgotten faces wet with tears. On the ground, Lisa collapsed. Nora caught her before she hit the floor, her skin pale, her breath shallow but her eyes open and clear. Did it work? She whispered. Above the city, the Jar ships powered down their weapons one by one, then turned and left without a word. Silence returned. But it was different now, heavier with meaning. Kale found them in the vault, his armor scorched but his eyes bright with awe. They left. He said they just left because they remembered. Lisa said weakly, in the days that followed. Lisa recovered, slowly wrapped in warmth and care. Lyra brought her broth infused with healing herbs. Nora read to her from the oldest earth tales, and Kale simply held her hand. His presence a quiet promise. The council declared a day of remembrance, not just for what was saved, but for what was reclaimed. The Jar had not been defeated by force but by memory, by the simple, unbreakable truth that every life leaves a mark. Lisa was honored not as a hero, but as a keeper of echoes, the title given to those who carry the light of others in their hearts. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the crystal spires, the four of them sat on their balcony sharing silence and starfruit jam. Lisa leaned against Kale while Lyra braided her hair and Nora hummed an old Earth tune. She thought of her old life on Earth, the small apartment, the crowded streets, the loneliness she had carried like a second skin, and she realized she did not miss it. Not because it was bad, but because she had found something more. Not just love, but belonging. Not just family, but home. The stars above watched as they always had. But now they felt closer, as if they too were part of this quiet circle of four hearts beating in time. Not because the law said so, but because they had chosen each other again and again, through fear, through doubt, through silence and song. And in that moment, Lisa knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The aurora drifted through the outer rim of the Andromeda Veil, a region where starlight bent in strange ways and time flowed like slow water. Ilara stood at the main viewport, her fingers pressed against the cool glass, watching as nebulae twisted into shapes that looked like faces. Voices from forgotten systems whispered through the ship's comms, not in words but in feelings, longing, regret, hope. She did not flinch. She had learned to listen without fear. Lisa watched her daughter from the doorway, pride and worry tangled in her chest. Ilara was only 12 by Earth count. but her eyes held the weight of centuries she had sung peace, into war zones calmed dying stars, and once even coaxed a rogue black hole into stillness by weaving a lullaby from the memories of those it had consumed. They had not returned to Virex Prime nor to Earth. Instead, they traveled the quiet places, the broken places, the places no one else dared to go. Their mission was simple. They carried memory. Where? It was lost in song where there was only silence. Kyle maintained the ship, his hand steady on the controls, but his gaze often drifted to Alara as if making sure she was still real. Lyra negotiated with alien councils using not treaties but shared stories that built trust one breath at a time, and Nora kept the archives alive, updating them with every new world they touched. One evening, as the Aurora orbited a dead moon covered in the ruins of a civilization that had erased itself to avoid pain, Alara turned from the viewport and said, "We must go to the Silent Core." The others froze. The Silent Core was a myth, a place said to exist at the center of the galaxy, where all sound, all memory, all life had been sealed away after the Great Fracture, a war so terrible it had cracked reality itself. No ship had ever returned from its edge. "Why, Alara?" Lyra asked gently. "Because it is calling to me not with words but with absence. And absence is still a kind of voice." Nora pulled up ancient star maps, her fingers trembling slightly. "The path is not safe. The gravity wells shift without warning, and the echoes there are not kind." "I know," Alara said. "But if we do not answer, who will?" They prepared in silence. No grand speeches, no final goodbyes, just the quiet certainty of purpose. The Aurora's engines hummed a low note as they entered the fractured zone space. Itself seemed wounded here. Stars flickered like dying candles, and planets hung tilted on broken axes. On the third day they found the first marker, a ring of black stone floating in vacuum covered in symbols that bled light when touched. Alara placed her palm on it and gasped. The symbols were not writing, they were screams trapped in stone. She began to sing, not a song of joy or comfort, but one of witness. She gave voice to the pain held in the stone, and as she did, the ring shattered into dust that scattered like ash on solar wind. Deeper they went, passing through fields of frozen time where ships hung motionless, crews caught mid-breath, their faces twisted in terror. Alara sang to them too. Not to wake them, but to release them. And one by one the ships dissolved into starlight. Finally they reached the edge of the Silent Core. It was not a place, but a wound in space. A sphere of perfect blackness that swallowed light, sound, and thought. The Aurora shuddered as if afraid to get closer. "We cannot go further." Kyle said, his voice tight. "This is where reality ends." Alara stepped forward. "Mama, I must go alone." "No," Lisa said instinctively. "You taught me to stand with open hands," she replied. "And this is what that means." Tears filled Lisa's eyes, but she nodded. Alara floated from the ship, wrapped only in a robe woven from skyvine and memory threads. She drifted toward the darkness, and as she crossed its threshold, the universe held its breath inside. There was no up, no down, no time, only silence so deep it felt like death. But Alara did not panic. She closed her eyes and reached, not with her hands but with her heart, and she found it. The center of the silence was a single note, a sound so pure it had been forgotten by all but the void itself. It was the first song the universe ever sang, the one that made stars from dust and life from light. The beings who had sealed the core had not meant to destroy it. They had tried to protect it, fearing it would be used as a weapon, but in hiding it, they had starved the cosmos of its source. Alara began to sing with it, not over it, but alongside it. Her voice human and Virex and something new blending with the original note until the silence cracked. Light poured out, not blinding, but gentle, washing over the fractured zone, healing the tilted worlds, calming the frozen ships. The Aurora rocked gently as if rocked by a mother's hand. When Alara returned, she was changed. Her skin now held constellations within it. Her eyes shimmered with the birth and death of stars, but her smile was still the same. "What did you see?" she asked. "Everything," she said, "and nothing. It was not a place. It was a promise." They left the core behind, not sealed, not open, but awake. Its song now flowing freely through the galaxy, carried on solar winds and whispered in the dreams of sleeping world. News of the healing spread faster than any ship could fly systems. that had been at war for generations laid down their weapons not because they were forced, but because they heard the song and remembered they were part of something greater. On a small moon near the Orion Spur, the Aurora landed for rest. The surface was green with new growth where only ash had been before. As they stepped onto the soil, a group of children ran toward them, not in fear, but in joy. They had heard the song too, and they knew Ilara's face from their dreams. That night around a fire, made of singing leaves, Lisa held her daughter close. "You did not just heal space, you healed people." Ilara leaned into her mama. "I did not do it alone. You all taught me how to listen, how to care, how to be brave even when I was scared." Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your strength is ours too," Lyra smiled. "The galaxy needed a bridge and you became a river," Nora added. "And rivers do not ask permission to flow. They simply go where they are needed." In the weeks that followed, they did not seek glory or power. They simply continued their journey, stopping where the song grew faint, helping where memory had faded, teaching others to listen. Not just with ears, but with hearts. Ilara never called herself a savior. She called herself a student always, learning always, sharing. Years passed, though none of them aged as others did. Time bent around them, shaped by the song they carried. Lisa's hair turned silver, but her eyes stayed bright. Kale's scales deepened to the color of midnight. Lyra's voice could calm supernovas, and Nora's archives now spanned more worlds than anyone could count. One evening, as the Aurora sailed through a sea of newborn stars, Ilara stood at the viewport again. But this time, she was not alone. A young Virex boy and a human girl, both rescued from a dying colony, stood beside her. Learning to hear the music in the void, Lisa watched them from the doorway and felt the same mix of pride and peace she had felt all those years ago on Virex Prime. They had started as 4 souls bound by law, but they had become something more: a family, a home, a living song that echoed through the stars. And somewhere in the endless dark, 1,000 voices sang back, not in worship but in harmony. The universe was vast and full of danger, but it was also full of light. And as long as there were those willing to listen to the silence and sing into the dark, the song would never end. Ilara's first steps were not on solid ground but on light. She toddled across the glowing floor of their home, her tiny feet leaving faint trails of silver that faded like morning mist by the time she was 3. She could hum melodies that made the sky vines bloom out of season, and her laughter caused the memory orbs in the Garden of Echoes to pulse in rhythm with her joy. The child was not just a bridge between species, but a living harmony, and the planet itself seemed to lean closer whenever she spoke. Lisa watched her daughter with wonder every day, seeing in her the echo of Earth sunsets and Virex starlight. Kyle taught Ilara the warrior's stillness, how to stand calm in storm and danger. Lyra showed her the art of listening, not just to words but to the silence between them, and Nora filled her mind with stories of lost worlds and brave hearts, so she would never forget where she came from or what she carried. But as Ilara grew, so did the whispers beyond Virex Prime. News traveled fast through the galactic web, and soon every major system knew of the child born of human and Virex blood. Some called her a miracle, others a threat, and a few saw her as a key. One morning, a message arrived not through official channels, but through an old rebel frequency used during the Jar Wars. It was short and coded, but Nora deciphered it quickly. "The Terran Alliance wants to meet. They say they come in peace, but they request Ilara's presence." Lisa's blood ran cold. The Terran Alliance was Earth's governing body, a coalition of corporations and military factions that had long abandoned the ideals of unity. They saw people as assets, and now they saw Ilara as a weapon. "We will not go." Kale said, his voice like stone. "But if we refuse, they may come anyway," Lyra warned. "And if they arrive with ships, they will not ask nicely." Nora pulled up star charts, her fingers tracing routes through dead zones and forgotten nebulae. "There is a place," she said. "The sanctuary of Veils. It is hidden beyond the Shroud Rift. No scanner can find it and no weapon can breach it. But the journey is dangerous." "We have no choice," Lisa said, looking at Ilara, who was playing quietly with a glowing orb that showed images of coral whales swimming in ancient seas. "We protect her not just from harm but from being used." Preparations began in secret. The Aurora was refitted with cloaking shields and memory dampeners to hide their trail. Lyra encoded false signals to mislead trackers. Nora packed Archives of cultural data in case they needed to prove Alara's right to exist, and Kale sharpened every blade he owned the night before departure. Alara climbed into Lisa's lap, her silver eyes serious. "Mama, where are we going? Somewhere safe," Lisa said. "Will the stars still sing there?" "Yes," Lisa whispered, "and you will teach them new songs." They left under cover of the twin moons, their ship slipping through the atmosphere like a shadow. The city below dimmed its lights in silent farewell. The journey through the Shroud Rift was not measured in distance, but in silence. The nebula swallowed sound, light, and time itself for 3 days. The aurora drifted in a void where even the ship's hum seemed too loud. Alara did not cry. She sat by the viewport, humming softly, and the rift responded with gentle ripples of color as if recognizing Heron. The 4th day they emerged into a system no chart had ever named. 3 small planets orbited a quiet white dwarf, their surfaces covered in forests of crystalline trees that chimed in the solar wind. This was the sanctuary of Vaelsa. As they descended, a figure waited on the landing pad, tall, slender, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that held galaxies. She raised a hand, not in threat, but in welcome. "I am Celine, Keeper of the Veils," she said, her voice like wind through glass. "You are expected." The sanctuary was not a fortress, but a living archive built by beings who had fled war long ago. It existed outside galactic law, protected by ancient harmonics and the simple truth that those who sought it did so not for power, but for peace. Celine led them to a dwelling woven from light and memory. "Here you are safe," she told Lisa. "Your daughter's song is already known to us." Days turned into weeks, and the aurora became still, its engines cold, its weapons silent. Alara explored the crystalline forests, making friends with creatures of light and shadow. She learned to weave songs into the trees, and the trees sang back. But peace never lasts forever. One evening the sky flickered, not with stars but with intrusion. A Terran scout ship had pierced the outer veil, its hull marked with the Alliance insignia. A burning earth encircled by chains, scale readied for battle. But Celine placed a hand on his arm. "Violence will shatter the veil," she said softly, "and then we are all lost." "Then what do we do?" Lisa asked, her heart pounding. "We let them see her," Celine replied. The next morning, Lisa stood at the edge of the central grove. Alara, in her arms. The Terran delegation arrived, 10 soldiers in black armor and 1 man in a gray suit, his face smooth with practiced calm. "Ambassador Croft," he introduced himself. "I come not to take but to offer." Lisa said nothing. "Your daughter is unique," he continued. "She could unite humanity. She could be our voice in the Galactic Council, our symbol of progress." "She is not a symbol," Lisa said. "She is a child. But think of what she could do with guidance, with training, with the right environment." "You mean your labs, your tests, your control?" Croft's smile did not reach his eyes. "We only want what is best for her and for Earth." Alara stirred in Lisa's arms, then looked at Croft, not with fear, but with deep knowing. She reached out a small hand and touched the air between them. A sound emerged not from her mouth but from the very ground beneath their feet. It was the combined voices of every species. The Terran Alliance had silenced every prisoner, every refugee, every lost world. Their pain, their hope, their refusal to be erased. The soldiers dropped to their knees, hands over their ears, tears streaming down their faces. Croft stood frozen, his face pale, his certainty crumbling. "This is what she carries," Lisa said quietly. "Not power, but truth." Croft left without another word, his ship vanishing into the rift as quietly as it had come. That night, around a fire of singing crystals, the 4 of them held Alara close. She was safe for now, but they all knew the galaxy would keep coming. "We cannot hide forever," Kale said. "No," Lisa agreed, "but we can choose when to be seen." In the weeks that followed, they made a new plan. Not to run, but to build. Alara would not be hidden. She would be prepared. She would learn, not just to survive, but to lead. Celine opened the deepest archives to her, showing her how to mend broken harmonics, how to speak to dying stars, how to carry memory without being crushed by it. Lyra began composing a new kind of treaty, one not written on scrolls, but sung into existence, a living law that Change with those who upheld it. Nora recorded everything not as data but as legacy. And Lisa taught Ilara the most human thing of all, how to say no with kindness, how to stand firm with open hands, and how to love even those who do not understand. Years passed through time moved differently in the sanctuary. Ilara grew into a girl of quiet strength. Her voice could calm storms, and her presence made even the oldest trees straighten in respect. One day she stood at the edge of the rift, looking out at the galaxy beyond. "Is it time, Mama?" she asked. Lisa looked at Kale, at Lyra, at Nora, and saw the same answer in all their eyes. "Yes," she said. They boarded the Aurora, not as fugitives, but as messengers. The ship hummed with new purpose, its hull etched with Ilara's songs as they crossed the rift. The stars seemed to lean in listening. The galaxy had tried to claim her as weapon symbol or miracle, but Ilara would be none of those things. She would be herself a child of Earth and Virex, a keeper of echoes, a singer of new worlds. And behind her walked her mothers and her father, not as guardians but as equals, bound not by law, but by a love that had reshaped destiny. The Aurora sailed into the unknown, not to hide but to heal, and somewhere in the dark 1,000 lost voices began to sing again. Months passed, and the quiet peace of Virex Prime deepened like roots in rich soil. Lisa no longer felt like a guest, but like a thread woven into the fabric of the world around her. She walked the crystal paths without hesitation, spoke the Virex tongue with growing ease, and even began to dream in the soft hum of the planet's song. Yet something stirred beneath the calm, a restlessness she could not name. It began with small things. She would wake in the night, her hand pressed to her stomach, not in pain but in wonder. She noticed her skin glowed brighter now, not just in dim light but with a steady warmth like a small star held close to the chest. Nora watched her with quiet intensity one morning over tea. "You are changing," she said. Not as a question but as a fact. Lisa looked down at her hands. They shimmered faintly with silver veins like liquid moonlight. "What does it mean?" "It means the bond is growing deeper," Nora replied. "The planet recognizes you as one of its own, and your body is answeringly." Ra entered. Then, her eyes wide with realization, she placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder. "You are carrying life, Lisa." Froze, her breath caught in her throat. "But that is not possible. Humans and Virex cannot." "We thought so too," Lyra said gently. "But the law that binds us is not just legal, it is biological. The union of 4 hearts creates a harmony. The universe listens to." Kyle returned from patrol that evening, and when Lisa told him he did not speak for a long time, he simply knelt before her, forehead pressed to her stomach, his shoulders trembling. Not with fear but with awe, the news spread quietly through the city. Not as gossip but as a shared hope. For generations, Virex births had grown rare. Their people slow to reproduce. In the wake of old wars and cosmic shifts, a child born of human and Virex blood was more than a miracle. It was a sign that balance was returning. Preparations began not with grand announcements but with gentle rituals. Lyra gathered skyvine blossoms that only opened under twin moons. Nora compiled lullabies from 100 worlds, and Kale carved a cradle from heartstone, a rare crystal that pulsed in time with a living heartbeat. Lisa spent her days in the Garden of Echoes now. Not just as a visitor, but as a guardian. She spoke to the memory orbs, telling them of the child growing inside her, promising to teach it both Earth songs and Virex silence. But not all watched with joy. In the outer rings of the city, whispers began to coil like smoke. Some elders questioned the purity of the lineage. Others feared the child would be neither human nor Virex, but something lost between worlds. One evening, as Lisa walked alone along the ridge path, a figure stepped from the shadows. Elder Torv, his face lined with centuries of judgment. "You risk the future of our kind," he said, his voice cold with disapproval. "This child may carry chaos, not harmony." Lisa did not flinch. She met his silver eyes with her own, now flecked with starlight. "I carry life," she said simply, "and life is never chaos, only possibility." Torv left without another word, but the unease lingered. Weeks later, during the festival of joining, a celebration of all bonded unions across the planet, Lisa stood with her family in the central plaza as light ribbons spiraled into the sky. Suddenly a tremor shook the ground, not violent but deep, Like the planet sighing in pain, the sky dimmed and the memory vaults flickered. Nora ran to the nearest data stone, her fingers flying over its surface. The Jar are not the only ones who remember, she said grimly. The Void cult has returned. The Void cult were outcasts who believed the universe should be emptied of all memory, all emotion, all connection. They saw life as noise and silence. As purity, they had been banished long ago, but now they had found a way to disrupt the planetary resonance using stolen tech and dark harmonics. Their goal was clear. They would silence the memory vaults forever, and with them every story ever told. Kale readied his blade, but Lisa placed a hand on his arm. Wait, she turned to Lyra and Nora. I cannot fight, but I can sing. Nora understood immediately. The child inside you carries the combined resonance of 4 souls. It is stronger than any weapon. They raced to the vaults, the city trembling around them as the Void cult's machines pulsed with anti-sound waves designed to unravel memory itself. Inside the core chamber, Lisa stepped onto the platform again. But this time she did not connect to the broadcast array. She placed her hands on her stomach and began to hum it. It was not a Virex chant or an earth lullaby, but something new. A melody born of her own heart, shaped by love, fear, and hope. The child within her responded with a pulse of light, so bright it filled the chamber. The Void machines shrieked, then shattered. Outside, the tremors ceased, the sky cleared, and the memory orbs glowed brighter than ever. In the silence that followed, Elder Torv appeared at the vault entrance, his face wet with tears. Forgive me, he said to Lisa. You did not bring chaos, you brought the song that holds us together. From that day on, no one questioned the child's place in their world as the moons cycled closer together, signaling the nearing birth. Lisa felt the child move with purpose, not kicks but gentle waves like tides answering the call of distant starson. The night of the twin eclipse, when both moons aligned and the sky turned violet. The time came. They gathered in the heart chamber beneath, their home surrounded by glowing vines and soft light. Kale held Lisa's hand. Lyra sang the old birthing hymn, and Nora monitored the resonance levels with quiet focus. There was pain, but also peace. There was fear, but also faith. And then a cry. Not loud but clear, a sound that held both human breath and Virex harmony. In Lisa's arms lay a child with soft blue skin, silver eyes, and a faint glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. The baby reached for her face with tiny fingers, and Lisa wept. They named her Alara, which in the oldest tongue meant bridge. In the days that followed, the city celebrated not with noise but with shared silence. A moment of stillness where every citizen stood beneath the twin moons and remembered what it meant to be connected. Alara grew quickly, her eyes taking in everything, her hands reaching for light and sound. She babbled in both tongues, sometimes laughing in a way that made the walls hum. With joy, Lisa watched her daughter play in the garden one afternoon, sunlight catching in her silver hair, and felt a fullness she had never known before. She had come to this world for love, but she had stayed for something deeper, for family, for purpose. For the quiet understanding that home is not a place but the people who choose you every day. Kale stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Lyra read poetry to Alara under the sky vines, and Nora recorded every moment in the memory vaults, not as history but as hope. The stars above burned steady and silent witnesses to a story that began with law but became love. And in the heart of Virex Prime, 4 souls and 1 small child lived, not as strangers bound by duty, but as one heart beating in many forms. The universe stretched on, vast and endless. But here, in this quiet corner of it, there was warmth, light, and the soft sound of a child's laughter echoing through time. In the quiet hum of the starship Aurora, the human woman Lisa sat alone, her fingers tracing the edge of a legal scroll that felt heavier than neutronium. The document declared her legally bound to Kale, a warrior of the Virex hive, a species known across the galaxy for their honor, their strength, and their ancient marriage customs. Lisa had agreed to this union willingly. Or so she thought. She loved Kyle, his calm eyes, his gentle voice, even the way his scaled skin shimmered under soft light. But now the scroll revealed a truth she never expected. According to Galactic Law Section 7, Subsection Delta, any union between a human and a Virex automatically extended to include all of the Virex partners' bonded sisters. Lisa blinked, reading the words again, then again. It could not be real yet. The seal of the Interstellar Council glowed faintly at the bottom, confirming its validity. She was not just married to Kale, she was now also married to his two sisters. Lyra and Nora panic, fluttered. In her chest she had never even met them. Kale had spoken of his sisters only in passing, mentioning their roles as diplomats and scholars, but never once hinting at this arrangement. Lisa stood pacing the narrow corridor of the Aurora. Her boots, clicking against the metal floor. She needed answers. Kale found her near the observation deck. His tall frame silhouetted against the swirling colors of a distant nebula. He looked concerned, his silver eyes soft with worry. "You read it?" he said quietly. "You knew," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You knew and you never told me." "I wanted to," he replied, his voice low, "but I feared you would say no. And the treaty between our peoples depends on this bond. The Virex do not form partial unions. We share everything. Our homes, our duties, our hearts." Lisa crossed her arms, tears stinging her eyes. "So I am just a piece in your political game?" "No," he stepped closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder, but not touching. "You are more than that to me, you always have been. But my sisters, they are not strangers, they are part of me and now part of you." Before she could respond, the ship's comm chimed, announcing the arrival of guests. Lisa's stomach dropped. She knew who it was. Moments later, two figures entered the deck, both tall like Kale but with softer features, their skin a lighter shade of blue, their eyes the same silver but filled with curiosity rather than wariness. One wore a robe embroidered with stars, the other a simple tunic with data pads strapped to her belt. "Lisa, this is Lyra and Nora," Kale said gently. The one in the robe stepped forward, her voice melodic yet firm. "Greetings, sister. I am Lyra, envoy of the Seventh Ring. I have studied your world, your art, your music. I have waited long for this day." The other woman, Nora, gave a small bow. "I am Nora, archivist of the Memory Vaults. I know your favorite book, your childhood pet's name, and that you drink your coffee with 2 sugars but never cream." Lisa stared, stunned. "How we have watched you." Lyra said simply, "Not with malice, but with care. You are important to Kale and therefore to us." Over the next few cycles, the Aurora became a strange home to the 4 of them. Lisa kept her distance at first, sleeping in the farthest cabin, eating alone, but the sisters made no demands, they simply existed near her, offering quiet companionship. Lyra would recite poetry from Earth and Virex worlds alike, while Nora shared stories of ancient civilizations and lost technologies. One evening, Lisa found Nora in the ship's library surrounded by holographic texts. Nora looked up and smiled. "You like the old Earth novels, the ones with spaceships and Rebel show, did you know? You left a bookmark in your cabin. It was bent at chapter 12. You always bend your bookmarks when you are nervous." Lisa sat beside her, surprised by how easy it felt to talk. They spoke for hours about books, dreams, and the loneliness of being far from home. Nora confessed that Virex sisters often felt incomplete without their bonded partners, and that meeting Lisa had given them hope. Meanwhile, Lyra began teaching Lisa the Virex language, not just the words, but the meanings behind them, the way certain tones could express sorrow, joy, or longing. Lisa found herself laughing, for the first time in days, when she mispronounced a word that meant starlight, but sounded like sleepy lizard. Kale watched them from afar, his heart swelling with relief. He had feared rejection, but instead he saw something new, forming a bond. Not forced by law, but chosen by heart. Still, doubt lingered in Lisa's mind. One night she stood on the observation deck, staring at the endless stars. Kale joined her, his presence warm and steady. "You are thinking of leaving," he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here for you, not for a family I didn't ask for. But would you have said yes if you knew?" She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Maybe not at first, but now I see them not as strangers, but as people who care, who listen, who remember how I take my coffee." Kale smiled gently, "Then stay. Not because the law demands it, but because you want to." The next morning, Lisa sought out Lyra and Nora. They were in the garden module tending to bioluminescent plants that glowed in soft purples and blues. Lisa took a deep breath. "I want to try," she said simply. "To be your sister, not just on paper, but in truth." Lyra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and Nora reached for Lisa's hand. her touch cool but comforting then. We begin today. From that day forward, the Aurora felt different. It was no longer just a ship, but a home. Laughter echoed in the halls. Shared meals became rituals and late-night talks turned into traditions. Lisa learned to braid Virec's hair while Lyra taught her Earth songs. Nora helped her navigate the ship's systems, and Kale simply loved them all equally. Weeks later, the Aurora approached Virec's Prime, the sisters' homeworld, a planet of towering crystal spires and oceans that sang with harmonic resonance as they descended. Lisa felt nervous, but Lyra squeezed her hand and Nora whispered, "You belong with us," on the surface. They were greeted by elders and citizens alike. The union of a human and 3 Virecs was unprecedented, yet the crowd did not jeer. They watched in awe as Lisa stepped forward, not as an outsider but as one of their own. In the grand hall beneath a sky of twin moons, the 4 stood before the High Council. The elders spoke in the old tongue, binding them not by law but by choice for all time. After the ceremony, they returned to the Aurora not as strangers bound by duty but as a family forged by understanding, trust, and something deeper than words could name. Lisa looked at Kale, then at Lyra and Nora, and, for the first time since arriving in this vast universe, she felt truly home. The stars outside the viewport burned brighter than ever, not as distant lights, but as witnesses to a love that defied species borders and expectations. And in that quiet, ship sailing through the endless dark, 4 hearts beat as one, not because the galaxy demanded it, but because they chose it together.